Hello everyone, my name is Paul, and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. I hope that you guys are ready for a wonderful holiday if you're in the United States or elsewhere that celebrates Thanksgiving. And I hope that you guys are safe, that your family are safe, and I hope you have plenty to be thankful about. There's a ton of stuff obviously happening in the news, which is one of the reasons why we're starting very late tonight. I do apologize for the inconvenience. However, as you can tell on the map, a lot has happened over the last 48 hours. Some very big things that have come out all over the globe, and I hope that you guys will bear with us as we kind of have to take our time and try to report on this stuff accurately and get as much information as possible to make sure you're well informed. And the reason we're doing all of this, of course, is not just to report and commentate on the news that's happening throughout the world, but of course to go through and to raise money for charities. We want to be able to do as much good in the world as we physically can, and to help as many people that are affected by the very news stories as possible that we talk about here on the channel. So if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there, all of which have been vetted by us to make sure that they are reputable. And on top of that, 80% or more of their donations that they receive actually go to their programs, meaning they go to helping people. Now, down there, you'll also find a new link for tonight, and this is going to be for Friday night. One of our community members is actually also a fellow streamer. He does gaming streaming, and his name is DemizeFPS. So his link is down in the description below. He's going to be running a charity stream with a hope of raising $500 on Friday night, the 25th, this upcoming Friday. Between, for us, for those that may be in Eastern time, as I know a lot of you are, it will be 3 p.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for them. And it will be running until about 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or about 11 p.m. Eastern for you guys. Once again, it's going towards a organization called Stack Up. What they do is they are actually a veteran organization in the United States, and what they do is they provide mental health services, and they raise awareness of things like post-traumatic stress disorder, something I have a personal battle with, as well as anxiety and depression and many other things, as there is quite a large amount of large-scale suicides amongst veterans. Something very hard-hitting to me, something very close and personal to me, and I think it's awesome that he's trying to raise money for this. If successful, hopefully he'll be able to do even more in the future for other great causes. I'm hearing things about Georgia Legion going about and many, many other things. So please go and check out his stuff on Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and go and check him out, show him some love. And he's an awesome member of the community and has done a whole lot of awesome stuff for us. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Demize. I hope that the stream goes very well, and I hope that you are able to raise and far exceed that goal, because it's an awesome, awesome thing that you are doing. And remember, if you can't give a lot to these organizations, whether it be with Demize's or whether it be with us, then give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do is actually support the channel for us, or support his channel there on Twitch, and go and give us that like or subscribe and share us amongst your communities, and that will actually garner a bunch of support and hopefully be able to that'll hopefully bring more people in that can also donate. So awesome to see others joining in on the project. So thank you very much. And as we get ready to roll into the news here for the night, there is, once again, a ton of things. Unfortunately, a lot of things are conflict related, whether that's against the global war on terror, whether that's international armed conflicts, or tensions rising across the globe. Luckily, I have a little bit of experience with that on a smaller scale. So I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served in the United States Marine Corps as a corporal and 0352 anti-tank missileman. I was with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and I did 2 deployments to the Middle East. And my first deployment between October of 2017 and March of 2018, I spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria, where I went up into Deir ez-Zor province and also into Al-Hasaka province, where I spent significant amounts of time. I also went through and I also went to Kuwait during transit for most of that. My second deployment, I deployed once again, and I was the Javelin team leader attached to Easy Company, who was acting as the crisis response company between October of 2019 and March of 2020. I went to Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time, but I also went to the Baghdad Embassy complex on New Year's of 2020, when the Baghdad Embassy was overrun with protesters and also Katiba's Hezbollah militants. I went back there. I oversaw all anti-armor operations over the Baghdad embassy as one of the 100 Marines that deployed to that facility, where I spent about a month and a half in total. After that, I immediately went to Saudi Arabia and trained Saudi Arabian Marines getting ready to deploy to Yemen. I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. I am also a fully cross-trained machiner, a fully cross-trained rifleman. I am a partially cross-trained radio operator, and I am also a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional extensive medical training by naval corpsmen. So I can speak rather intelligently about things at the small unit leadership level. I'm not formally trained at strategic level things, but I will do my best to inference and evaluate what's going on. Likewise, I try to remain very well-rounded, so I try to I am very interested in things like geopolitics and history and also human geography, all sorts of different subjects. So I have a lot of interest in these kinds of things, and I will do my best to answer any of your questions as I am watching the live chat. And please feel free to ask questions or to raise comments, and I will read them and I will answer them here live on the stream if you're with us live tonight. So but yeah, so feel free to ask. If I don't know a question, simply will say as such, I just don't know, or I'll give you the best answer that I physically can. But with anything, subject matter expert or not, I implore that you as the viewer, please do your own research. Do not believe everything you hear on the internet. Please go through, do your own research. If you find something interesting or you want to know more, you can always go through, research that stuff yourself. There's this wonderful thing called Google, and if you want a starting place, if you go to the description, you'll find a link for our website. Our maps are posted on our website every single day, and we make sure to get those out there. You can click on the maps, and you can interact with this map just like I do here on the stream every single night. And you can go and you can click on any of the additional links we have provided for you and any of the sources that we have on there for the information you're seeing. So please feel free to go and check out that stuff if you want a good starting place. But with that, we begin immediately moving into the night's major topics, which are, of course, Ukraine. The Ukrainian war has been ongoing since February the 24th and continues to roll into what we are now looking at, the 273rd day of the conflict. There's been a ton of different developments, and many of which are actually taking place out of the region of Kyiv, which is the capital of the country of Ukraine. And we actually start off just north of the main city itself up here. This is in Vyshhorod, which is to the north in the Kyiv Oblast. During a large-scale strike on Ukraine today with a massive swarm of ballistic and cruise missiles, several missiles did not necessarily reach their intended targets in the main city, but they did in fact reach civilian targets or secondary targets for the Russians, which we see here. This is a residential building which was struck here in Vyshhorod, and the number of casualties right now is not known, but it did end up striking an apartment complex. And we can see some of that here. And you can see the amount of destruction. I mean, this is a child's playground. You can see the destruction in these buildings. And of course, we already have war crimes prosecutors on scene, as we have seen. So unfortunately, just an extensive amount of damage. Once again, we do not know the amount of casualties coming from that. See, we already have a bunch of questions coming in. Any reason for why 480 is now max resolution? I have no idea. I wish I could tell you. And Arch Instinct has one related to this topic. Hey, Paul, what's the preferable heavy NATO weapons for mountain warfare? Ooh, that's really difficult. Well, believe it or not, you can really do pretty much anything that you would need. So there's actually, so for the Marine Corps, we go to this place called Bridgeport. Bridgeport is in California, and it's the mountain warfare training and the winter warfare training center for the Marine Corps. It's also where you can, for MARSOC operators, and believe other branches too, they go up there for their training for horseback riding as well, because if you may remember, there were Green Berets that actually went to Afghanistan at the beginning of the war and actually had a horseback ride with the Northern Alliance forces that they were linking up with the very, very beginning of the war in Afghanistan. This is back in 2001, early 2002. And they learn how to do that at the Mountain Warfare Center there in Bridgeport. It's very harsh. It's one of the hardest courses to go through. It's extremely difficult. It gets extremely cold in Bridgeport. It's probably one of the most hated. I'd say 29 Palms is pretty hated, but I believe that Bridgeport's probably up there, if not even more so. We especially hated going to Bridgeport, probably because we were in the desert. But snipers also go up there. That's where they complete their mountain warfare training for sniper school as well, when they're on their way from becoming hogs to razorbacks. So a lot of stuff. There are different ways to take equipment over mountains, especially over heavy snow in the mountains. And you can actually use sleds and different things. You get whole different types of sets of gear. Keep in mind, the gear that you're given usually is dependent on your mission type. So that's kind of what you're dealing with there, and it can be rather difficult to get a lot of heavy equipment up there, especially vehicles. But you're talking about, you can get Mark 19s and 50 cals. And you can get 240s and stuff for machine gun fire. You can mortars. They hike everything everywhere. I mean, we are constantly working on having to hike things all the time. So quite extensive. I mean, it really just vehicles, heavy vehicles. The tow system can be moved up a mountain, but it's difficult. And it is not the most. While it's technically labeled as a man-portable system, anti-armor system, the joke ongoing is that it is a He-Man portable system. So, yes, not always the most fun or fantastic. Is there any good resources I can read about infantry loadouts for mountain missions? I wonder. I would say if you can find any of is a helicopter the preferable method of transport for mountains? No, not necessarily, unless you're talking about hooking something in and dropping it from underneath. I can't think of any specific that would be available to you. The only ones I can think of is if you were to find any old manuals for mountain warfare techniques. The U.S. Army should definitely have some that's out. They're probably older. They're a little bit out of date, but most of the basics are just elaborated on in newer versions. Instead, the older versions just don't have some of those newer elaborations. I would also say. I would also say a lot of. I would also say the Scout Sniper School is probably the same way. Oh, here we go. There you go. Leader's Book for Mountain Warfare and Cold Weather Operations. Thank you, Riley, one of our researchers who brought this up for you. So yes, this is one of the manuals you can go through. This is the U.S. Army's version. But yes, this will give you basic loadouts and everything else that you can do, medical sustainment, if you're interested in this kind of stuff. However, I will say this. If you are looking at just mountain warfare stuff, and this goes for any specific tactical areas of operation that you're dealing with, please make sure you know the basics first. You have to understand the basics and build upon them. You can't just dive directly into a certain AO. Like we don't just get mountain warfare training, get mountain warfare training, if that makes sense. Like you are anticipating having to go through the main AO. You understand the basic concepts of what you have to do, especially on an individual and small unit leadership small unit leadership level, and you build upon those in order to successfully and those just give you additional tools for operating in that specific environment and building upon the basic knowledge you should already have. And that goes for most skills and most specialized training. So with that, we kind of move on here. And of course, I almost missed the Nuclear's Army Commander Conscriptovich. Quote, why are you here? I'm on vacation in the Bahamas, go away. And it's coming from Army Commander Conscriptovich. Thank you, Nuclear, for once again the commander speaking. We go down here and we continue on with Kyiv, where Kyiv was actually struck with several different missile strikes. Missiles once again struck the capital, causing immense damage throughout the city. Right now, it's reported that 3 million people are without water. It's caused, once again, the main target was critical infrastructure, which is actually a war crime under Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions. This is the immediate aftermath of one of the strikes. Fortunately, you can see, through these photos and through these videos, just the immense amount of damage. You see one of the casualties here, they're being covered with a foil blanket. It's very, very, it's very important, believe it or not. It would be much better if they raised him up. So what you don't understand, a lot of people think of, the immediate damage to somebody. That killing them. And while that usually ends up being the case, believe it or not, a lot of people die of shock as opposed to their actual injuries. Your body can do some amazing things. I mean, people have fallen without a parachute before and survived. Very rare, but it's happened. And, your body can do amazing things. Usually your mind gives out before your body does. But your body has this natural reaction in where it basically tries to save itself, but in the end ends up killing itself in the process. And this process is called going into shock. Your skin will become very clammy. You will begin to get pale. You get cold sweats. Very high temperature fluctuations, and something you have to do, one of the major steps in doing that, is not only continuing to talk to this individual after you've done your initial triage of them, and you should be talking to them during their triage to ensure that you're checking on their mental state, and that's also one of the ways you can observe if they lose consciousness or stop breathing. Likewise, one of the things you should immediately do post-triage is you should raise them up off of the ground, because the ground's going to suck out their body heat, trying to achieve equilibrium, but the Earth wins, and that as the Earth is much larger. You normally would raise them up. It's why stretchers are the way that they are. It's why they have legs. And you should be covering them with a blanket that keeps them warm, and also it keeps, especially in cold weather conditions. But you do this regardless. You would also do this in the desert as much as you would here, because your body is reacting in a very extreme way, where it's pulling all the blood back into the core of your body. So you want to actually put a blanket over top of them to keep them warm, and it helps to prevent shock. And unfortunately, a lot of people do end up dying of shock, especially because if you are the average person who does not deal with this very often, you do not understand the dangers of it, and you don't know what you're looking for. And it's something that I didn't realize until it was something I was taught. It was something that was very, very much hampered on by the corpsmen when I was going through CLS courses and training is treating for shock. Like, you have to treat for shock. You can't just you can't just let them go. Like, you can't just, okay, you got the tourniquets on, everything's noted, like, you're good, man, like, we're just waiting on the bird. Like, no, you are constantly having to treat the victim. You're having to constantly treat the patient, because shock will kill them if you do not stay attentive to it. And it can change their priority, actually, if you were calling it a Casevac. It can change their priority if it becomes serious enough. You see them trying to carry people away as well with whatever they can. These strikes, of course, continue to happen. We're continuing to see them, and the situation just is not, it seems to be improving. We do know that the air defense systems are increasing, but even NATO is limited in the quantity of air defense systems that they have, and therefore it would be it is very difficult to get enough to where we can prevent this. Russian tactics through the usage of using mass swarm attacks. Also, what they basically do is they overwhelm the air defense systems. And so while the vast majority will be shot down, as we will get to here in a moment, the reality is that some are going to get through, regardless of how many air defense systems you have and how good they are. There's too much to deal with for these systems and their crews to be effective 100%.
Повністю видали відповідь на ваше запитання.
We can see coming from President Zelensky's official Twitter, I have instructed our ambassador to the UN to request an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council following today's Russian strikes, murder of civilians, ruining of civilian infrastructure, or acts of terror. Ukraine keeps demanding a resolute response of the international community to these crimes. Let's see. Wow, we just have a lot of stuff coming in tonight when it comes to questions. We see, sounds good. What do you think of Kazakhstan's preparedness in case of a fascist Russia attacks before their downfall? Kazakhstan is mountain. He says a lot of Kazakhstan is mountainous territory, so researching what they need NATO equipment-wise would be useful for preemptive fundraising. Kazakhstan, well, you don't really have to look too far to see how bad that would go for the Russian Federation. If they were to attack Kazakhstan, it would probably go similarly to how Afghanistan went. They'd be effectively fighting against an insurgency, and Afghanistan ended in a strategic defeat for the Soviet Union, and was one of the major last nails in the coffin for the Soviet Union that eventually led to their collapse. So, would the military be pretty much wiped out to an extent? Yes, but the insurgency that follows in that mountainous terrain, as we can see in the graveyard of empires, also known as Afghanistan, we know that can be carried on for a very long time with very, very minimal, if no support. And we know that can go on to the point where no matter how large your military is, it's very difficult to fight counterinsurgency. It's very difficult. It's almost entirely unsuccessful, and there's also nothing more unifying than your nation being attacked in a massive way. So even though Kazakhstan, there may be a lot of people that may not like their government in Kazakhstan, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be willing to fight after they're attacked by an outsider, which is one of the really big reasons why NATO going to war with Russia isn't necessarily a good idea. Not because Russia hasn't proven itself completely incapable, because it certainly has, of fighting a war, but what little cracks there are in Russia, you would immediately fill them in by fighting a war directly, because Putin would inadvertently be proven right that they were fighting NATO, and that would galvanize support for the Putin regime and only make it even worse than what the situation already is. How effective would artillery be on Kazakhstan mountains? Artillery is very effective inside of mountainous warfare as long as it's done properly. The mountains in Ukraine are on the western border, right? If I'm not mistaken, they're on the border with Moldova, yes. Kind of in here. It's kind of more mountainous terrain. Definitely higher terrain. We'll get to, Syria. I have a whole thing on Syria, so we'll get to that when we get to Syria. Anyway, moving on with the actual news. Heart surgery during blackout. Of course, with Russia targeting all of the major critical civilian infrastructure, primarily speaking, they're targeting things like electricity grids. We see that this is knocking out critical civilian infrastructure. The additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions, adopted in 1977, this is for the 1949 Geneva Conventions, dictates the difference between between infrastructural targets. There is a difference. Infrastructural targets, by nature, usually are considered a military target. However, there is a clear distinction between the two. The primary usage of the infrastructure cannot be used for civilian purposes, even if it has partial government or military implications. And so they cannot also be long-lasting. Likewise, say, I'll give you a perfect example coming out of Ukraine itself. So the attack on the Kerch Bridge, which severely damaged the bridge itself. This is the Kerch Bridge. It it connects Crimea and Russia. We see that somebody, no one has taken official credit for the attack, though it's pretty widely suspected it was Ukraine. What ends up happening is by destroying this bridge, the reason why, even though that civilians use it, the reason why is it's primarily military function right now, meaning that the main purpose of this bridge is to provide military logistical support through its railway mostly, and also through its roadway, of being able to supply troops and equipment in Crimea, and therefore funneling it into the northern part of Ukraine. Whether you're talking about, you were talking about the Kherson Oblast, Zaporizhzhia, what have you. Whereas, say, the electrical grid outside of Kyiv, right? That stuff is primarily supporting the civilian population of Kyiv. Primarily. Are there government military infrastructures in Kyiv? Yes. But primarily it serves the civilian population which is there. Most of the civilian population is not evacuated Kyiv. So striking these targets is actually a war crime under Additional Protocol 1. Now, if it was say the electrical grid just outside of an air base, right? That is a fair game. The primary usage of that electrical grid is a military structure. It's to directly support the military base adjoining to it. But attacking one for a city, the main purpose is to support the civilian population, making it a war crime. And once again, that's the distinction created in Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, adopted in 1977. So there is a distinct difference. There is a reason why it's a war crime, and there's a reason why you cannot do and you also, in that same article, cannot use indiscriminate fires in order to strike these targets, which is what we end up seeing, as these things are very much indiscriminate. As a result of this electrical grid knockout, it is going to obviously severely impact the civilian population. Right now, the reports are that 3 million people are actually out of power in Kyiv. And one of the things that we see here, this is a heart surgery. This is open heart surgery occurring during a blackout. Electricity, water, and cellular may be down, but Ukraine's doctors are still fighting to save people's lives. Doctors are using portable LED lights and phones to light up the operating room. Take a look.
Вот так мы сегодня оперируем на сердце. Так сегодня оперируем на сердце. У нас операция с искусственным кровообращением. Выключился свет. Хирурги оперируют в своих налобных осветителях. Клапан?
2 клапана.
Операция двухклапанного протезирования с лампочкой на...
So he's having open heart surgery in a blackout. That's coming from Ilya Ponomarenko, by the way, who's a reporter with the Kiev Independent. That doesn't mean that Ukrainians aren't in high spirits. That we definitely see that the resolve is still there. There's quite a bit of resiliency amongst the Ukrainian civilians. Ukrainian musicians playing jazz here. As Ukrainian philosophers played jazz during a blackout in Kyiv in the darkness, hours after the new rounds of Russian missile strikes. And it's not an isolated incident either. See, this is a concert lit by candlelight. This is a concert at the Column Hall of the National Philharmonic of Ukraine in Kyiv. Was held by candlelight and light from flashlights of smartphones. You can see that performance there. Yeah, it's hard to break the resolve of the Ukrainians. I don't think that's something that Russia will ever be able to do. 35 Ukrainian servicemen and 1 civilian was exchanged in a prisoner swap today. Among them are Azovstal and Mariupol defenders, also National Guards who were captured at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the very first days of the war. Welcome home, guys. It's always happy to see something like that happening. 4,000 unbreakable points as power hubs. 4,000 unbreakable points of invincibility have been prepared to provide electricity, internet, heat, water, and first aid kits for Ukrainians in case of long power outages. We can see a map of those things here. And there's a site here dedicated to showing you where all of these are. It's an interactive map. You can see the different points of where these things have been set up. And this is interactive, so you guys can go, so you guys can actually check this thing out. It's pretty awesome to see. Ukraine is using technology, interactive maps. We've seen them use an app for unexploded ordnance and mines, and that will even give you an alert if you're getting close to the danger zone of that. We're seeing all sorts of stuff like this. It's pretty awesome to see that the government and also other organizations are going through and putting this kind of stuff together, in using this technology, using our modern assets that really weren't there for wars of this scale prior, to really be able to provide the population with up-to-date, real-time, interactable information that they can go through and they can personalize to them, and get immediate information when they need it. So it's been very effective so far. Unfortunately, it's not always 100%. Once again, no electricity, phones are dying, and all sorts of stuff. But now people can find these places to get that kind of stuff and to get charge their phones, get internet service, and provide these kind of basic things that they need that are saving their lives every single day. In total, 6 people have been killed and 36 have been injured following today's attacks. And the defense of Ukraine reported 6 civilian deaths and 36 more wounded following all of the missile strikes. And this is coming from the official Twitter of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Once again, that is not a military structure. That is an apartment building. Not a military target. The SBU ended up raiding an 11th century monastery, finding cache, pro-Russian literature, and possibly forged passports. So on November the 15th, the SBU announced it was opening a criminal investigation into a November 12th incident in the Perchaska Lavra. And during a service, worshippers sang a pro-Russian song with lyrics such as "Mother Russia is waking up." More than 350 church buildings and 850 people were searched and interviewed in suspicion of cooperation with the Russian Orthodox Church. Russian literature was discovered, used in teaching in the seminary and parochial schools, including the propaganda of the Russian world. Cash in the total amount of $2 million in Ukrainian money. Or hryvnia, more than $100,000 and several thousand Russian rubles. This would not be the first time in the first weeks of the war. There was many priests who were arrested for espionage with Russia. Coming from Interfax. Remember that the Russian Orthodox Church is really being used in order to instead of it's being used in order to back the state and less being used for its religious purposes. We see that even during services, much like for Ash Wednesday, when Christians are, which is this Wednesday before Easter, when Christians have ashes used and put into a cross on their forehead, the Russian Orthodox Church has actually released photos of where they were putting Z's on people's foreheads. This is in order to continue to support the war effort. The patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church is actually a very good friend and former KGB agent, a very good friend of Vladimir Putin's, and we do see that definitely shining through. So they're not very subtle about it. They're not very open about it. That's what Ash Wednesday is, as far as I'm tracking. Yeah, I mean it's. I'm sorry, but I have a hard. For those that don't know, I am not a very religious person. I'm sorry if that's kind of off-putting to some of you, but some of the things I've seen, I just can't believe in religion anymore. I apologize, but yeah. So if I'm a little rusty on that, I apologize. Ukrainian air defenses were repelled 5-1, Ukrainian air defenses repelled 51 out of 70 incoming missiles today, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. On November 23rd, Russia struck another blow against Ukrainian civil infrastructure. 70 missiles were fired, 51 were shot down. As a result of the Russian attack, civilians were killed and residential buildings were hit. We express our deepest condolences to the families of the victims. Once again, 70 missiles. Once again, mass strike. This is similar to the ideology of using a large amount of drones or a large amount of small watercraft to overpower the defenses of a much more competent military force, which is what we end up seeing here. Russia can't fire individual missiles and get them where they need to go. They have to rely on swarming their air defenses and hoping some get through. Finally, we get a child casualty update, and it is with a heavy heart that we report that, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 438 Ukrainian children have died and 841 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, and that is coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Unfortunately, that is a reality. That doesn't include the children which have been deported, which number in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands at this point. And we are also, that does not include those which are missing, upwards of almost 300 children on the last report that we got regarding missing children at this point. And that allows us to start getting into the meat and potatoes of the war, which is happening here in the Donbass, out here in the east. And we come up here to Kupiansk, where Kupiansk was shelled once again, despite being nowhere really near the front lines at this point in the war. And this goes for several other places as well. Kupiansk was shelled once again, despite, and this is presumably part of wide-scale strikes against Ukraine. You can see that here. Once again, damage to residential infrastructure is the most apparent that we see. You can see these trees are splintered and shattered like toothpicks. Definitely reminiscent of the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944 and 45. Yes. Yes, so we see that Riley put up a warning. Yes, I do apologize if you do hear a bell and some banging around. So our cat, Tally, who is the co-host of the show when she decides she wants to be, is she has a little bell around her neck. And it's adorable, but she also has a little activity board with treats inside of it, and she messes with it, and it can be rather loud. So I apologize. She also likes to go kitty crazy. Ukrainian troops were spotted in Stelmakivka here in the Luhansk Oblast. Ukrainian forces have been spotted in Stelmakivka, Luhansk Oblast, showing good signs. They're continuing to press their offensive against Russian forces within the region. We were getting updates very occasionally from Sergei Haida, who is the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, saying that upwards of 20 different villages have actually been liberated within the Luhansk Oblast so far. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of changes on the map itself just because we don't have enough visual evidence to support what we are hearing. And we only change it once we have some kind of visual evidence and after long periods of time where we cooperate with other sources that are and trying to find the middle ground between them. But anyway, we take a look here. These are Ukrainian forces in Stelmakivka, Luhansk Oblast.
Я ебу, блядь. А позрачить нам сколько? 6 метров. Пизда нахуй. О, ведро нам надо. Да. Дед, бери ведро. Сука, я ёбнусь нахуй. 6 километров, блядь.
Да, я уже устал.
Все, привал, блядь. О,
Гениальная идея, мне кажется, топовая.
да.
And if you listen closely, you can hear that artillery fire going off in the distance. So we know that the front line is relatively close. This looks to be like a rifle squad here. They're just on the move and they're just carrying their stuff. Probably just doing an administrative movement there as they kind of probably rotate there onto the line. Come down here and into the Donetsk Oblast, where we get, of course, our daily Donetsk update coming from Pavel Krylenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He said, quote, on November 22nd, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 1 killed, 8 injured. And we do get this from his official Twitter as well. And we see here that graphic, and he puts out this graphic every single day at 8 a.m. local time to cover the previous 24 hours of activity. And up until this point, this not including occupied territories such as Mariupol, Volnovakha, and many, many other locations within the Donetsk Oblast. So far, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February the 24th, 1,221 civilians have died, and an additional 2,628 civilians have been injured so far during the invasion. And those are the ones that can be confirmed. Over to Bakhmut, unfortunately, shelling by the Russian Federation, mostly those of the Wagner group, ended up hitting a fire station there in Bakhmut. So those first responders were struck. It caused badly damaged the building as well as several of the different fire engines and emergency response vehicles there. The entire city at this point has been shelled and bombed, and there's really nothing that is untouched by this Russian shelling. Mostly, they use the BM-21 Grad system. It stands for Hail in Russian, and the BM-21 Grad system uses 40 different tubes in order to fire 40 different 40 rockets, unguided rockets, 122 millimeter Katyushas, the same exact types of rockets used during the Battle of Stalingrad against the Nazi army inside of the city during that. And that is where these weapon systems became initially famous and heavily used then on by the Soviet Union and now, of course, the Russian Federation. It's indiscriminate fires. It's meant for saturation bombardment. The point of this is to put as much explosive firepower into a general area as possible. All of these munitions are dumb fire, meaning they're unguided, dumb rockets. There is no way to guide them. They land where they intend to land. And by using them on the city of Bakhmut, Mariupol, many, many others, including Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, they have completely destroyed these cities and leveled them into nothing more than rubble and burnt-out buildings. In fact, 90% of the city of Mariupol has been completely destroyed. We have no estimates for Bakhmut, but it would appear that the city, which has suffered under very severe shelling of similar magnitude by the Russian Federation over the last several months, upwards of almost 6 months now, continues, and we can see that is at this point also becoming the reality there. But everyone lives inside of bomb shelters or basements We've seen photos of that from the civilians there on the ground, and the situation as the winter sets in is only becoming even more and more deplorable, especially as this is too close to the front line for any major humanitarian aid to be coming into the city, as no groups, whether that be the United Nations or the International Committee of the Red Cross or any other major organization, deems it too dangerous to actually go there with any large shipments. We can see here the damage to some of these vehicles. So Bookham 40 asks, what is the Russian insistence in taking this town? Is it a springboard for further offensives? No. So to give you kind of the backstory, we actually got to back up in time a little bit. Bakhmut specifically was very strategically important several months ago. This would have been before July. So prior to July, in the counteroffensive in the Kharkiv Oblast, it saw all of Kharkiv retaken, essentially. The Russians were positioned in two separate areas. Up here in Liman, which they had taken during their offensive in the Luhansk Oblast, and down here in Bakhmut, coming out of what we called the Popasna pocket right here, which is a pocket that opened up in the defensive lines, and this actually put enough pressure on the Ukrainians in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk that they were worried about becoming encircled between the forces in Liman and the forces in Popasna. Bakhmut is a rather central city. You can see it already has a major crossroads on well-paved. It's a major crossroads for well-paved roads here in the city. It also has a rail hub. We all know how important the rail system is for the Russian forces. But Bakhmut really opens up the possibility of to conduct a wide encirclement movement to take the Donetsk Oblast. Together with a pincer movement coming out of Liman, these two forces could, so out of Bakhmut, they could have taken pushed on Bakhmut, or down here in Toretsk. We saw supporting actions in Soledar and Toretsk as well. And you can see that there are two major roadways that connect coming through Bakhmut all the way up by Slavyansk, and that would link up with forces coming out of Liman. This makes a perfect phase line, and it's a perfect major supply route, or main supply route, MSR. You can also see that there's another one down here by Toretsk and Horlivka, which would connect the city of Donetsk and Makivka in these areas, which we know that there are large amounts of Russian forces and major supply points. And this road leads all the way through Toretsk, through Kostanivka, and all the way up through Kramatorsk, which is the de facto capital of the Donetsk region within Ukrainian control. And it's also a very important major supply point, regional administrative head at this moment, and also has a giant rail yard. If you may remember, there was a massacre here using a Toshka U system before or right about the beginning of the Donbass campaign by the Russians. The forces would have pushed from Liman to Slavyansk and then on to Kramatorsk. Russian forces would have pushed from Bakhmut and Kostanivka and Toretsk and all the way up to Kramatorsk. This essentially means that if they take these two cities through that pincer maneuver, they could have also encircled several tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops in the pocket of the Donetsk Oblast, or force them to retreat. It would have destroyed the Ukrainian army in the Donbass, and it would have also caused the entire collapse of what was left of the Donetsk Oblast, meaning that they would not only secure their Luhansk objectives, but also the Donetsk ones as well, attaining most of the Donbass in the campaign. The Kharkiv counteroffensive in July ended up completely destroying that. And because they completely got rolled on their flank, this means that it splits the fires in two directions. The Russians now they have to dedicate forces to stop the counteroffensive in the Kharkiv Oblast, and before it can before incursions really begin to incur in major numbers into the Luhansk Oblast. And now it's no longer viable for them to actually go down here and take Slavyansk. And we actually see Ukrainian forces push into Liman and actually push them out in several weeks of bitter fighting. But down here in Bakhmut, most of the time the forces weren't told of the major defeats in other areas. They're already cut off. They don't have communication anyway, so they're fed whatever they're told from the outside. And so in order to maintain order and discipline within these regions without causing further demoralizations, most Russian standard forces, as well as those militias fighting for them, simply weren't told. And instead of having standard forces around Bakhmut, we end up seeing the Wagner Group push in here. And the Wagner Group needs a political win in order to gain more recruitment numbers. But as a result, the fighting has been exceptionally brutal here, as the Wagner Group is known for their brutality and their bitterness and their fighting. And we have seen very much a back and forth between forces of the LPR militias as well as the Wagner Group really engaging up here in Soledar and Bakhmutsky, and were pushed out from the outskirts of Bakhmut. Simply saying there's a breakdown in the Russians. It was important, it no longer is. But because of the way that Russian command and control structure work, which is that it's very top-down heavy, meaning that they are very heavy in their officers, and orders are carried out over and over and over again until different orders come. And that is completely opposite of what you see from Ukrainians, and exactly the opposite of what you see from NATO. NATO puts a lot of emphasis on small unit leadership. They have a very strong NCO corps, non-commissioned officer corps, and a lot of emphasis is put on taking the initiative when you can seize it in order to complete further objectives and even objectives that you may state for yourself within the parameters of your mission. Whereas the Russians, they are very top down. They're very officer heavy, and they are strict to carry out their orders and only their orders. So they aren't trained. They do not have a strong NCO corps. They're very officer heavy, and the way that their military doctrine works is it's based off of immediate orders, which is great for situations such as a war in a nuclear environment, which is the same reason for their push logistics instead of pull logistics. But it doesn't work very well in conventional arms wars and combined arms wars. And we see it becoming very difficult for the Russians to do anything. And this is the same reason why you see absolutely battered battalions just throwing themselves, knowing that they're combat ineffective, but continuing to throw themselves at Ukrainian defenses over and over and over again, just becoming absolutely demolished in the process, is because they haven't received different orders and their commanders are still pushing them to carry out their orders, even though there's no hope of them being successful in their mission. So that is really why we see the Bakhmut turning into the slugfest we do. At this point, where we're at now is the Russians are just throwing themselves at it because their orders haven't changed. But it also does serve a tactical point for them. Because there are so many forces dedicated to Bakhmut by the Ukrainians in order to hold it and to strengthen and push out the Russians from this area, what we end up seeing is this creates what's called a fixing force. A fixing force is where you put a small group of troops into a line area, and it fixes the opponent's concentration on that unit. And what this does is it allows for other units to maneuver around them, to flank around them. That is the point. So it ties up a large quantity of Ukrainian troops to fight this battle. Even if it's not significant for the Russians, the Ukrainians have to fight this battle, because if they don't, it could open up a gap in their line. They have no choice. And as a result, the battle here in Bakhmut is fixing a lot of Ukrainian troops here that could be used in other places, including other counteroffensives, including the one happening just north of them in the Luhansk Oblast up there by Bilohorivka. Instead, the Wagner Group is now keeping them there in Bakhmut in this very brutal fighting that this fighting here in this region is not won in victories of kilometers, but is paid for meter by meter and body by body. We've literally seen World War I style wave attacks by the Russians against Ukrainian positions on the outskirts of Bakhmut at this point. It is that bad. That is the conditions. It is World War I style with AKs. That is what we were seeing there. And that is the point of the Russians still attacking this, is it keeps Ukrainian forces dedicated to the fight in this region instead of pushing somewhere else where they could be much more better used. I hope that's a good explanation for you. As we jump down and into the Donbass, we see a couple of different things. We see several miracles happening. And believe it or not, there's a lot of luck that goes into a war zone. Combat is very much luck, more often than not. I mean, it's a shot in the dark who gets hit and who doesn't. And this guy is saved by his hand grenade. So we see here that this Ukrainian soldier was hit by an incoming small arms round, and it actually hit the hand grenade that he was carrying, and it actually punctured the hand grenade and stopped inside the hand grenade itself. So hand grenades, believe it or not, don't explode as a result of hand grenades don't explode in the same way that you think they do. They use usually plastic explosives, which catch on fire, sure, but they don't detonate. They don't use black powder anymore. But it also kind of shows you how a hand grenade works when it cuts this thing open. So that's why it doesn't explode when it was impacted. That's because the actual charge inside of it that causes it to detonate, the blast cap, really wouldn't have detonated from this. And that's what sets off the other explosives. Now, this, you can see the inside of the hand grenade, and it shows you can see the outside, but the inside is the interesting part. So the way that a hand grenade works is it creates fragmentation. Fragmentation are these little chunks of metal, and that's what wounds and kills people, is that fragmentation. And you see it if you look at old hand grenades, the Mark II from World War II, also known as the pineapple hand grenade, you see how it has notches in it everywhere. That's the fragmentation. When the grenade explodes, those are going to break apart in those weak little crevices. It's going to break apart, and each of those little squares now become shrapnel, and that's what's going to injure or kill you. In modern hand grenades, that is done on the inside, and instead, these little chunklets are actually built onto the inside and carved on the inside of the hand grenade, and that is each of these little squares is a little chunk of metal that becomes fragmentation when a hand grenade explodes. That is how this stuff works. So it uses a plastic explosives compound inside of the hand grenade. It's set off by a blasting cap that is tied to a fuse, hence why you get about 3 to 5 seconds after you throw a hand grenade, and why you have a little bit of a chance to throw it back if you don't cook it. And that is how the shrapnel actually works out of a hand grenade. And you can see that being portrayed here when he has cut this thing open to show us, just how this saved his life. So pretty cool. Couple of cool things in a single instance. These guys are also very lucky to survive. Their vehicle was hit by an anti-armor weapon. It appears that they were in an IFV, or an infantry fighting vehicle, BMP series more than likely, and it would appear that their vehicle went up in flames. Not uncommon for any kind of light armored vehicles like we see for the BMP series, as they only have about 12 to 25 millimeters worth of armor, and a single tandem charge warhead will go through it. In fact, even 50 cal rounds, especially armor piercing or slap T, Sable light armor piercing, will actually go through them pretty much like butter and set off a sympathetic detonation, is what I would call it, but basically it cooks off the vehicle. And we see that these guys managed to survive, though they are a little worse for wear.
Машині.
Що, фоточки, відео, блядь?
Ти як?
Там не пизда.
Як там, дякую, що живий.
А де мой телефон? Де моя
Братан, мой теж.
Братан, там тоже.
Сука, блядь. Ноги нахуй поломала.
Yeah, little worse for wear. A little worse for wear, that's for sure. But he's alive, and that's the important thing. And that's one of the reasons why cat tourniquets are so important. I still use cat tourniquets. The cat tourniquet is, if I can pull it off here, this is a cat tourniquet. There's different types, but if you are going to get a tourniquet, this is it. This is the one. get these things. Do get these. These are the ones. They are easy to use. You can operate them by themselves, by yourself. You can render self-aid with these things. It's a lot easier if you have a buddy, but the cat tourniquet is the way to go. It's literally CAT. And these things are the ones that, no, I'm not sponsored by them, but these things are what I used in the Marine Corps. I've saved a lot of people with these things. When I was in Syria, they work extremely well. They're very easy to use. They're very effective. And yes, go with cat tourniquets. And if you're looking to donate, it's called a cat tourniquet, CAT. Let's see if I can pull it there for you. It's literally called is it not? It's not going to show up, is it? I don't think. Nope, it's not. It's a cat tourniquet, CAT. They have two different types. You'll see them that I am aware of. You'll see them. They have this one has a gray cover. It's for the time that you put the tourniquet on. There's other ones that have white covers. That's fine too. But definitely get them. And also make sure you always have the red tab out. That's the end of it. But that also can very easily let somebody know that is your tourniquet. But that is, yes, they're extremely good. They work very well. I always recommend them. And if you are in a position where you're looking for tourniquets, especially for donating them to Ukrainian forces or Ukrainian medical teams, cat tourniquets are the ones. That is what they are looking for because they are effective. How long do you leave them? How long do you leave them on for between releases to let the blood flow again? Is it 40 minutes? You don't. You don't. So very important. If you are the individual providing first aid to somebody, if you apply a tourniquet, do not take it off. Even if it breaks, get a different one and put it on them. Do not, and I cannot emphasize this enough, do not release the pressure off of a tourniquet. Do not do it. You do not release the pressure off of a tourniquet. It can take less than a minute for someone to bleed out. It can take less than a minute. Whether you're talking about the brachial artery, which is in their arm, that's the one. If you push your arm on the inside right here, you'll feel it moving, and you can put pressure on it. That's your brachial artery. Your femoral artery is the one that runs on the inside of your leg, and of course, if your aorta or your jugular is cut, you don't tourniquet someone's neck. At least there's only one instance that I know of that you do. And you're probably never going to have to do that. But for their limbs, their brachial arteries, or their femoral arteries, it can take less than a minute for them to bleed out. So you do not release that. You do not release the pressure off of a tourniquet because it can cause them to bleed out very rapidly. So you should not be releasing cat tourniquets. You should not be bloodletting, essentially, and releasing pressure. You are more likely to kill them than you are to help them. The best thing you can do is get them to a hospital or a higher echelon of care where they will be able to do that, because they will be able to improve survivability. But your best bet also is there's a time frame. So there is a time frame. It's called the golden hour, and from the time of injury, you have 1 hour roughly to get them to a higher echelon of care before they end up their chances of survival actually decrease significantly. So that is kind of why that 40-minute rule, I think, is probably a thing. But no, you should not ever release the pressure off of a tourniquet if you ever have to apply one to somebody in order to stop bleeding. Never, ever release the pressure. Fair says, the instructor says tighten it further than you can take it. Yes, you do. This is going to hurt quite a lot. So if you're taking a tourniquet, this is about to hurt a lot, by the way. Take a tourniquet and you're applying it properly. You should, so you're going to tighten it. So this, I can't believe I'm doing this, but you're going to take it and you're going to loop it through and you're going to tighten it as hard as you can. And you're going to wrap that around. Okay. And then, after you finish wrapping this thing around, you're going to twist the windlass until you can't think you can tighten it anymore. And then you do it another time. Then you take the rest of the strap and you put it over it so that way it stays in place. And so that is how you should properly apply a tourniquet. And you can check it by if you can take your 2 fingers, if you can't get them underneath, the tourniquet with your 2 fingers, it's tight enough. It should be blocking the blood flow. And you can see I can't get my fingers underneath it. And now I'm going to release this and cry. Come on, get... Oh my god. And so that is how you should properly apply your tourniquets. Yeah. Please don't do that at home. It does... I am actually a trained professional, so please don't do that at home. It is very painful. But yes. That's dangerous, isn't it? No. So... It is, but it's if you do it for a long time. So if you do it for a long time, so if you do it for too long, it cuts off the blood flow, and you can actually end up if you do it and you can't get it undone, which is why I say please don't do that at home. If you do it and you can't get it undone, you can actually cut off the blood flow, and if you do it long enough, it'll actually cause you to start having to lose limbs. It'll actually cause your your limbs to start dying, your stuff to stop dying there. So, Charlton Brooks says, my brother was pushed through a window and some stranger used his shoelaces. Technically, yes, but also no. So if you use something too thin, which is why, like shoelaces and stuff aren't a good idea, you want to use a belt. If you can, if you have to make a makeshift one, a belt is really good. It's not great, but it's good. But if you use something too thin, what it actually ends up doing is you can actually end up crushing tissue and everything in their leg or in their arm or wherever you're applying a tourniquet, or you can actually end up cutting through it because the pressure required to cut off the blood flow, and it can actually do more harm than good if you use something way too thin. So Aravis says like a scarf. You could technically do a scarf. Once again, it depends on how well it's tightened down. The key thing is to stop the blood flow. And if it's a serious injury or actual arterial bleeding, you could have less than a minute to do that. So that's why it's so important. So whatever. If you don't have a tourniquet, use your knee. That's actually the first step. Is to use your knee, and you actually put your knee on someone's femoral artery or on their brachial artery. It is extremely painful, but you'll save their life because it will cut the blood flow, and that is actually what allows you to put the tourniquet on, so that way they don't bleed out. So yes, use your knee. It may hurt. They may hate you after you're done, but it will save their life, and that's the important thing. See, Ukrainian soil is no stroll through the park. This is a Ukrainian tank. And once again, like I was saying, the Rasputitsa mud actually affects both sides very heavily, and it makes it difficult for both sides to conduct that maneuver warfare. And when we see that here, this is a Ukrainian tank that actually got stuck in the mud. So you can see here, those guys have to try and get this vehicle recovered. Yeah, not a fun time. Not a fun time at all. We also saw that the Super Bonker 9000 was spotted in the wild. This is a 2S7 Peon, or a 203mm self-propelled gun, which sports the NAFO insignia and is named the Super Bonker 9000, thanks to a hugely successful fundraiser. And it has been now spotted in the wild outside of that fundraiser, operating there on the front lines. You can see it, Super Bonker 9000 with the bonk stick. And you can see all the NAFA fellas over it. Yeah, this crew is rocking. And that is the original photo. You can see you can see just how dumb it got. So yes, but it's the Super Bonker 9000 is what it was officially named, and it's this is NAFA Article 69 for those that don't know. Oh, here we go. Unfortunately, it would be Arson Singh says hashtag NAFA Article 69 there shall be super bonking. Just remember one thing, that only the Ukrainian troops and the Foreign Legion are the ones that get to call Article 69 on anybody. So stick to Article 5, guys. NAFA expansion is non-negotiable. Yes, NAFA expansion is non-negotiable. But yes. Yes. Riley, it may hurt, quote unquote. I remember people crying when they were taught how to apply tourniquets in MCT. It hurts like a beach. Yes, it does. It hurts a lot. Why don't they teach first aid in school? Much more useful than trigonometry. Trigonometry is actually pretty important. I actually use quite a bit of trigonometry in the Marine Corps, actually, of all places. Direction, deflection, and angle of fires and minutes of angles for your weapon sights. Yeah, not fun. Also, impact. You can actually use that in order to counter battery. You use trigonometry actually to figure out the angle of fire and the position of fire. And you also use that for indirect fires, especially for me, it would have been for a Mark 19, but mortarmen and artillerymen have to do that too. And you also have to do that kind of, you wouldn't say you have to do that kind of math as a forward observer, but it definitely helps. Come up here where there's a little bit less of a laughing topic, and we see that Vilnyansk was struck with missiles. Russian missiles ended up striking the city of Vilnyansk in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. One of the missiles destroyed a 2-story maternity ward at the local hospital, trapping a pregnant woman and a doctor under the rubble. Where rescuers were able to free both of them, the unborn child was unfortunately killed in the blast. You can see the destruction of that there. It's coming from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. You can also see this coming. Kiev Independent had several photos coming out of the destruction. Irva says, I do think everyone should learn basic applying tourniquet and BLS. I think it's a very important skill to have, but unfortunately, something that I have learned is that basic life-saving skills are not very hard to, it's very easy to screw them up, and it's very easy when you're talking about life and limb. It's very easy to screw something up and to make the situation immensely worse. It's very, very easy to do that, even with some of the most basic things. In the Heimlich maneuver, you can actually, if you do it incorrectly, you can actually severely damage the individual's diaphragm. If you are, checking airways, you can actually, if you're not careful, you can actually clog their airways or make it more difficult. If you have, if you do CPR, as Charlton Brook brought up, you do CPR. You do CPR different ways, depending on if it's a child or if it's an adult or if it's an animal or if it's there's different ways that you do CPR. And there's different things you have to do for each of them. And it's very easy. You can also end up, if you're using too much force, you can actually damage someone's rib cage, or you can actually cause worse things to happen to them if you do it incorrectly. Severely, you can severely injure them, because this is where all the vital stuff is. I mean, a gut shot will kill you too, but I mean, this is where all the this is where all the vital stuff is. And Bookham 40 puts it very well. He says it's a soft skill that needs constant refreshing. Exactly. You have to constantly stay on top of it. It's a lot like a how do I put this? It's a lot like learning a language. If you don't use it, you lose it, and you have to keep up to date with it. And it definitely, like, I'm constantly having to reread stuff and go back through stuff that I've written down or stuff that I have, and constantly having to remind myself of certain things. And this goes for anything. I mean, even the stuff from my milk. That's why I have all those manuals all out, and why I have a couple manuals next to me that I constantly am keeping here. Is because I constantly have to refresh stuff to stay on top of it and to remember, because there are certain things I don't remember that are very imperative to my job, and in case I ever get called back or anything else, I want to be able to remember that stuff and save people's lives. Save someone sort of by once putting them in the recovery position waiting for an ambulance. Yes, that's also very important. The recovery positions are very important. Just make sure that the individual can breathe and that you're not going to obstruct any airways in the process. Also, if you ever move somebody, going back to the tourniquet thing, if you ever move somebody, check the tourniquet again. Every single time. Doesn't matter if you move them 5 feet. Doesn't matter if you move them over on their back. Use 2 fingers. Make sure the tourniquet's still tight every single time. Anytime you move somebody, you are rechecking that tourniquet. Once again, quickest way to bleed out. You'll know it's arterial bleeding because it'll be very thick, heavy blood, and there'll be a lot of it. It'll be very dark red blood. Heavy shelling also ended up striking the Kherson Oblast. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at civilian infrastructure in the Kherson region on November 22nd. 2 people were killed, including 1 child. 10 citizens were injured, including 2 children. That's coming from Yaroslav Yanushevich, the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration. Down here in Sevastopol, the air defense was heard all night of the night of the 22nd. It is unknown what the cause was. However, it is possible that they were responding to a Ukrainian attack on bases nearby or the Black Sea Fleet.
Это уже с Севастопольской бухты. Ебать, что за хуйня нахуй? Ебать нахуй!
So we're still seeing some action coming out of there. We also saw that Medvedchuk was spotted here in Crimea. Putin's bestie Medvedchuk and former president of Russia was transferred to Russia as part of prisoner. Or sorry, he's not former president of Russia. I apologize. Putin's bestie Medvedchuk was transferred to Russia as part of a prisoner exchange months ago. He seems to have longed to go back to Ukraine. And that actually wraps up all of the news inside of Ukraine, but don't worry, there is plenty of news outside of the country of Ukraine as well. And we immediately roll into the international news with, actually, we jump over here into Russia, where we come over, and this is in Belgorod region in Russia, where an armored graveyard has been spotted. Just imagine the losses. Most of these vehicles have, at the very minimum, 2 to 3 crew, not including the guys in the back. These are all vehicles too damaged or destroyed to be used in the war. Tim Epps said, heard Ukraine got some 150-kilometer range rockets finally. I have heard rumors, but I have not heard anything or seen anything that would suggest that. And I doubt we would unless it was very clear that it happened. I.e., Crimea is in for a winter. Yes. But those rockets, you're talking about probably the ATACMS, which is known for its long range. But I doubt that we would actually officially know unless we actually got to see them in action. So I understand the possibility of it, and I haven't heard enough rumors about it that it's possible, but it's not something that I want to give a definitive answer of yes or no to, because there's simply just not enough information to be able to say, yes, it's happened. And we have said, and I know I've said some things here before to say that. British Mark II missiles. Once again, I don't have any information to say one way or the other. But you can see here the level of devastation already caused with or without those missiles, what has happened to the Russian army, and that is just an immense amount of destruction to their military force. These are I'm seeing a lot of BRDMs in here, Mistas, tanks, you name it, it's here. And you see just the level of destruction these things have suffered. Most of these things have 2 to 3, 3 to 4 man crews apiece, not including troops that they carry on the back of them or in them or what have you. Jump here into Moscow, where Wagner is proud of their war crimes. In response to the European Parliament's announcement today, they were planning to declare the Wagner PMC a terrorist organization. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is the founder of the Wagner Group and its spokesman, sent an engraved replica of a sledgehammer referencing the execution video Wagner posted last week. And they have fake blood on the handles, but you can see here. Sent in a violin case. Yeah. That'd be Wagner for you. Now, just remember one thing. And you know what? I think I said it here. So I'm gonna find it. Yep. I made a meme about this. What Wagner thought fighting NATO, or what Wagner thought fighting NATO was going to be like, versus what Wagner fighting NATO was really like. For those who don't know, that is a bunch of Wagner guys blowing up via wonderful ISR footage thanks to an MQ-9 Reaper drone over Qasham, Syria. So Yeah, that's how fighting NATO went for Russia, and it will go equally as well if they think that they're going to. They won't. They don't intimidate me at all, at all. Don't get me wrong. They're better shots than ISIS are, but not by much. Especially not when they're blowing up. That's another thing. Yeah, not my. Yeah, I have no respect for the Wagner group. They're a bunch of punks, and they think that they're hard. They're not, and they die just as easy as the rest of them do. Dystopian and genocidal rhetoric. This is a little bit of insight thanks to interviews of the average Russian here in Russia. So we get a little bit of a little inside treat here.
Власти должны продолжать или закончить спецоперацию в Украине?
Уже пора их бомбануть так, чтобы они уже там все... И наши ребята вернулись домой. Какие-то надо радикальные меры, потому что они так не успокоятся. Бережем там инфраструктуру, там все на свете. Да уже, уже что делать? Погибнут люди, они и так гибнут. Что делать?
Я не диванный эксперт, да, я доверяю нашему президенту и понимаю, что есть какие-то глобальные цели, для чего это происходит.
Такого предательства терпеть нельзя. Это ж нас Украина русских всех предала, понимаете, самым грязным, безобразным образом предала Украина русских. А что с ними делать? Вот так.
Продолжать. Надо, как наши предки. Осину и кол в Киеве бить. Все.
Продолжать до конца, как взялись.
Мы Россия, мы великая страна. Понимаете, и как мы можем не справиться с какой-то маленькой такой страной? Это не может быть так, понимаете?
Надо все продолжать до победы. Мы только надеемся на победу. Потому что ради вас, ради внуков и правнуков. Только за победу.
Ведь мы не согласны, что нацисты будут над нами командовать, правда? И наши родители воевали.
Продолжать надо идти до победного. Конечно, хочется, чтобы все вернулись домой, живы, здоровы.
Надо, чтобы пацаны сами шли, помогали своим ребятам.
There you guys go. Yes. Yeah. That is yeah. So there's the average point of view regarding what people in Russia think about the war. Brimstone 2 missiles. This is coming from Tim Epps. He says, Brimstone 2 missiles normally air to ground, but those clever guys put them on flatbeds to launch, according to the Telegraph and Jerusalem Post about 8 hours ago. Yes, actually, we saw that the Brimstone 2 is... So, the Brimstone is essentially... if you've ever heard of... So, you have, like, tow missiles. Like, that giant thing behind me is a tow missile. Okay, it's a tow missile tube. There's no missile in it because I would have never been able to take that away. I would be, there would be so many police. I would be in jail for so long if that was the case. That's a tow missile tube. It's tow 2 Alpha. It's an anti-tank guided missile. And then you have the Hellfires. And Hellfires are helicopter versions, essentially, of... They're not exact, but basically it's a helicopter version of a tow missile. Brimstones, you have Brimstone, which is the British version of that. So that is what these things are. Hellfire and Brimstone. Get it? Yeah. Air-to-ground missiles. Did you shoot that one? No, I didn't shoot that one. I've shot them, but I didn't shoot that one specifically. But when you're talking about Brimstone 2 missiles, that's just an upgraded variant. Usually they don't fly very far. So they have some good range to them, but not 150 kilometers. They are able to go onto flatbed trucks. They are, and it's not really a flatbed, it's a box truck that actually has a launch system built into it, and it's something that was actually designed by NATO countries in order to allow them to use lighter vehicles to maneuver these things. So that's actually a thing. We actually saw the development of that prior. I think we actually commented on it when we were talking about brimstones too. Yeah, so there's that, and they also, I believe they have a Connex box version of it too, that you can actually fire them things from. So pretty cool, but their main purpose is air-to-ground anti-tank warfare. An almost unnoticed mission came out. Russia's state Rosenergoatom, which is the agency, which is basically their version of the atomic energy agency for their country, stated the shelling of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be stopped if Kyiv signs a document on guarantees. So, when have we heard this before? This means that the Russians are admitting that they are shelling the power plant. We will stop shelling the power plant if Kyiv signs a document of guarantees. We will continue the grain deal if Ukraine signs guarantees. That's just one other example. So, there you go. They're shelling the power plant. As we had all suspected for months now, the Russians are shelling their own power plant, trying to farm Ukraine with it. So now they must sign guarantees for the shelling to stop. Jumping over to Moldova is a country in darkness. More than half of Moldova also lost electricity following Russia's latest missile attack. Moldova has summoned the Russian ambassador. Russian Instinct says, I think that the Black Sea Fleet needs to join the Moskva. I'm impressed that the Black Sea Fleet already hasn't joined the Moskva. Anyway, this is Moldova. So as you can see, Moldova is left in the dark. Jumping back up here to the north, we come into the Gulf of Finland. And large-scale military exercises have started here in Finland. So the Gulf of Finland and the Archipelago Sea, the largest exercise of the Finnish Navy this autumn, Freezing Wings, began. It is noted that the purpose of the exercise is to conduct an international joint operation on the coast of Finland and the waters of the Baltic in particular by teaching the military to provide, receive international assistance. The exercises were attended by 23 warships, ships of the technical fleet, as well as units of the naval forces and infantry. In total, about 5,000 people are involved. In addition, there will be high flight activity in southern Finland and the northern Baltic Sea during the exercise. The Freezing Wings exercise will last for more than a week, and they will be joined by military personnel from Germany, France, the United States, and Sweden. Down here in Strasbourg, France, we see that Russia is a terrorist state. Not that anyone needed to say anything to know that, but Russia is a terrorist state, and they're officially so as they were designated by the European Parliament as a state sponsor of terrorism.
The Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. There is a joint motion for a resolution tabled by 3 groups, and it is broadly adopted. Congratulations.
Let's look at those results. What do we got? 596 votes were given. 494 approved of Russia being a terrorist state in Europe. 58 were against. We now know who's on the payroll. 44 abstained. Ferris says Le Pen's party mostly. Yeah, I can see that. But then again, Marie Le Pen is also known for her Russian ties and also being very much an autocratic leader and a democratic system. We did air what she did to a protester one time. That was not fun to watch. Basically, think of what Putin does to protesters. She did that, but without the ability to send her to jail. We jump up here into the United Kingdom, where London supplied Kyiv with high-precision laser-guided missiles. Britain has sent Ukraine Brimstone 2 precision-guided missiles, reporting from the Telegraph. The range of the missiles, when launched from an aircraft, is 60 kilometers. When launched from the ground, in ground forms, 12 kilometers. The cost of one projectile is estimated at 175,000 pounds. How many rockets London has sent to Kyiv is currently unknown. And that is the Brimstone 2. It's an anti-armor weapon. Oh, geez. Oh, that's an interesting question. Do you think that a large-scale reforger exercise can still be conducted? Do we have the resources to move an Army Corps or even a Marine Division within a reasonable amount of time? Yes. Okay, so not 150 kilometers, says Arch Instinct. You know, it's not 150 kilometers. Those are the ATACMs, and I don't think they're getting those anytime soon. But to go back to Bookham 40's question regarding can we move an Army Corps or Marine Division within a reasonable amount of time, I think there's a Shaggy meme out there for this, but the United States really doesn't flex its whole muscle. It really doesn't. It could, but it really doesn't. You see, the United States is much more capable than what we really seem to really tell the world stage. Like, we really project a lot of power and influence. But it's, you know, the amount of resources. So there's an entire auxiliary fleet. Like like civilian ships, cruise liners, and everything else can immediately be called into military service and used as troop transports. Like, it's called the auxiliary fleet. Civilian refueling ships, merchant marine ships, like all of that can be immediately called into service. We have an immense capability to conduct amphibious operations, which is why the Marine Corps is training right now to take on the entire Pacific theater by themselves, without really any Army support. I mean, we dropped tanks too because they were too heavy. We're like, we don't need those. The United States has been preparing and has been swapping from counterinsurgency to near-peer threats for a long time, and we certainly have the capability to move large amounts of troops, including entire divisions if need be, in very short order. Now, short order militarily is not as fast as you think. Short order can be... So there can be a MU, or a Marine Expeditionary Unit, deployed anywhere in the world within... like, I think it's within 48 hours. Like, there will be Marines, boots on the ground, within anywhere in the world within 48 hours. I think it's much less than that in reality, if need be. So we constantly have rotations of troops going out, and they are used. We call them ADVON, but they would really be the troops that get on the ground, assess the situation, provide immediate support. A MU is a self-contained battle group and has everything it needs to complete any wide range of missions it may be asked to do. It's really a strike force. Strike hard, strike fast. But it's not meant for sustained operations. But it allows time for larger military units, like the rest of the 1st Marine Division, for instance, could be able to be aboard ship and ready to go while that MEU is striking and really providing those defenses. But when you're talking about moving large amounts of troops, a quick response time would be like a week. It'd be a few days, but really to get all of the troops moved, it would be like a week. It'd be quite a significant amount of time. It'd be very difficult. It's logistically very difficult to do any kind of large-scale movement for the United States. But there's also a distinct difference between us and everyone else, and that is the fact that we have 2 oceans to cross. No matter where we want to fight in the world, we pretty much have to cross the ocean. But as a result of that, the United States has for decades, and for well over 100 years now, been learning and preparing on improving their ability to do that. World War I, World War II most notably, but even in the 1800s we were conducting amphibious assaults against places like Tunisia, the Battle of Tripoli, yeah. So, I mean, there's quite an extensive, and a lot of lessons were learned during World War II just because of the amount of logistics required. Those never went away. They've only been built upon in their scope and capability. But also, that's why the United States has so many bases around the world, is so that way it gives us time to move battle groups as need be. Because we can move, like, there's already carriers everywhere in the world. You just pick the closest one and the other one, and that can provide support until the other ones come. Or you can use troops, we have a crap ton of troops in Germany. Like, that's just for that purpose. So, we jump down here and into Turkey. We're seeing that a 6.0 magnitude earthquake ended up hitting near Istanbul. A magnitude 6.0 earthquake has struck western Turkey, and European Mediterranean Seismology Center said, while the country's interior minister said that there were no immediate reports of deaths or significant damage. The quake was at a depth of 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles. The Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Damage Authority, or AFAD, which measured the quake at a magnitude 5.9, said the epicenter of the tremor was near Golyaka, which is a district in northwestern province of Duce. At least 50 people have been reported injured. Ervis asks, are those cats? Yes. And they are terrified. Those poor cats. And that is where the epicenter is. Which you can also see here. It's over by Istanbul, essentially. Over here, this is on the Anatolian Plain. We jump down here and into Israel and Palestine, where we have a couple of different developments coming out. There was a terror attack there in Jerusalem. 1 killed and many were injured in 2 IED explosions. 2 IED explosions occurred in the central bus stop of Jerusalem, according to updated data. 1 person was killed and 19 others were injured. Among them are people in critical and serious condition. It's not clear who is behind the incident. Security forces are conducting an investigation at the scene of the incident.
عملية يا شباب عملية
You see the damage to the bus there. Meanwhile, down here, a Palestinian school was torn down by Israeli forces. Israeli forces demolished a primary school built in the Palestinian community of Kirbet al-Safai al-Fokoh in Masafer Yada. The forces removed the tables and chairs from the classrooms and confiscated them. The school, financed by donations, was built about 3 weeks ago. It has been reported that 3 teachers taught 23 pupils who were in 1st to 4th grade from local communities. The school was planned to extend to 9th grade in the future. Before it was established, the children attended school in another community. However, children and teachers have been detained at checkpoints close to the school. School was meant to enable children to study undisturbed. The demolition is reported to be part of a wider campaign of evictions by the Israeli government in this district, making space for Israeli military training. Up here in Syria, Turkish forces continue to shell PKK positions. As part of Operation Klossor, the Turkish armed forces attacked Kurdish forces in the Syrian provinces of Aleppo, al-Raqqa, and al-Hasaka. The goal of the Turkish pilots was roadblocks, fortifications, and weapons depots. Not far from the city of al-Hasaka, the joint garrison of counterterrorism unit of the Syrian Democratic Forces and the international coalition led by the United States came under attack. During the raid, 2 fighters of the Arab Kurdish forces were killed. 3 more were seriously injured. There are no Americans in the unit. The Turkish Air Force also bombed several electrical substations and damaged 2 oil infrastructure facilities in northern Syria. You can see some of the photos here coming out of those strikes.
تماشاوان هجا دولت ترک آداگر کر دوان کلیان دو ایریشن بچک انگران لسر گنده تات مراشه بکدینن
قابل تپه شانه
You see here some of the launches. Razan Gelo, a senior official of the PKK and YPG, appears to have been killed in one of the strikes. They ended up striking his car. Bongo truck specifically. Comishly. That's up here in the north. This is frustrating. Unbelievably so. And the United States has stated, you know, like, we have forces here. Like, we have troops in this region. We have troops embedded with the SDF. You don't go anywhere in Syria without the SDF. Like, if you're an American troop in Syria, you don't go anywhere without the SDF. They escort you. They're with you. They're in their billeting areas. You know, you're living with them. You're standing post with them. You're eating with them, sleeping, everything. Like, it's the SDF. So, from that standpoint alone, it is immensely dangerous for Turkey to just strike at these installations because they're SDF installations. If that makes sense. Like the gas, like the oil facilities they're talking about. I know what one of those are. It's the Omar oil fields. Guess what? I was one of the guys that set up that fob at the Omar oil fields. Yeah, that's the thing. U.S. troops are at those oil fields. U.S. troops are at those gas fields, the Conoco gas fields, northern Syria. U.S. troops were in many of these locations. They're called FLOTs, forward lines of troops. We're at the fire bases. We're at the ad hoc airstrips. And I wonder if Turkey realizes the repercussions of what would happen should they injure or kill American troops in their strikes. Like, they would... Well, their fancy contract for F-16s would probably immediately get vaporized. To start. They were directed by U.S. advisors, no? Yes. The SDF, we advise and assist the SDF. The SDF are not PKK. I want to make that pretty clear. Isn't Turkey in NATO? Yes, Turkey is in NATO, which is equally frustrating. Every single time I see Turkey pop up in the news, every single time, it is doing something that I don't believe a NATO country should... I don't believe a NATO would agree with at all. They're bombing the SDF. Everyone else in the entirety of NATO backs the SDF. Has been. The Polish are behind the SDF. The Americans are behind the SDF. The British, the French, the Italians. Like, everybody else is behind the SDF. Supporting them. Giving them fire support. Giving them direct support. training, advising, intelligence. Like, we do so much. And then here comes Turkey, the only group in NATO who actually defines these guys to be terrorists or whatever because of the PKK. And they bombed the Peshmerga in Erbil, in Iraqi Kurdistan. They bombed the SDF, who the YPG and the YPG are guys, YPJ are girls, which form the YPK, are not the PKK. They're two different groups. The PKK are Marxist. The YPG, YPJ are democratic. Syrian democratic forces. They're not the only ones in the SDF either. It's a conglomeration of both Arab and Kurdish groups. It's just the YPG and YPJ happen to make up a lot of them, because this part of Syria is Syrian Kurdistan. The Kurds are the most oppressed group in the Middle East. Turkey hates them, has committed ethnic cleansing against them, much like they did the Armenians, which they still refuse to recognize. The Syrian government has done the exact same thing, hence why they have revolted against Bashar al-Assad, the last Ba'athist leader in Syria, or the last Ba'athist leader in the Middle East. Which, by the way, Baathism as an ideology isn't necessarily bad, but it leaves itself prone to dictatorial rule, which is why Baathism hasn't worked. Same thing with Iraq. You know who was gassed by Iraq following the Iranian-Iraq war? Yeah, guess it. The Kurds. Sarin gas used against them. Nerve agents. Mustard gas. Guess the Kurds. Iran. You know all those massacres that just happened in Iran against anti-government protests? Guess where they're at? Iranian Kurdistan. Yeah. The Kurds are awesome people. Cool people. They're awesome. There's some frustration. There's some tensions. The combat zone. Of course there are. But in general, the Kurds are cool people. They're really nice. They would literally give you the shirt off their backs, and they don't even know your name. They're some of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. They don't care about your religion. They really don't care about anything like that. They just care about whether or not you're a good person. Like, that's the gist of their mentality. Like, I've shown it on before. Like, I have a patch. I have a YPG patch. One of them gave me. You know, I tried to give him one of mine. Refused to take it. He just wanted to sit on the back of a Toyota Hilux that we had there and smoke a cigarette and drink chai tea. That was it. Like, that's all he wanted. And under Recep Erdogan, who is the president of Turkey, they have gone to ultra ethno-nationalism. If you're not Ottoman Turk, you're not one of us, you know. If you're not Turkish, if you're not an Ottoman Turk, then yeah, we're against you. They have not had any kind of... They have not been very nice to Armenia. They have not been all that happy. They're not very nice to Georgia. They're not very, obviously, of course, there's hostilities with Iran. But there's not just hostilities against Bashar al-Assad, but the Kurdish people. And they've literally had their identities scrubbed away inside of Turkey. There used to be a huge population in southern Turkey of the Kurdish people, and there was literally ethnic cleansing that occurred there. They wiped out their culture. They banned their language in many areas. They destroyed their literature by the authority of the government. Burned their books. Banned teaching of their language in schools. Banned their usage of their language. Banned customs and traditions of the Kurdish people. All under anti-terrorism measures. Like, that is what happens. The PKK did some pretty nasty things. Yeah, they did some things that are definitely consistent with terrorism. 100%. But you could say the same thing about Ukrainian partisans, too. And we know that that's a genocide under the Geneva Conventions. And while they haven't committed genocide against the Kurds, they definitely have repressed them. And they continue to oppress them. They continue to do that in Syria. They push it in Syria. They're conducting military operations into Huk province of Iraq. Unlike the United States, the Turkish government wasn't invited back into Iraq. In fact, the Turkish government didn't care about Syria at all. Didn't care about the civil war. Didn't join the coalition. Didn't care about the Islamic State having a giant caliphate that covered the entire part clear up into their border. Didn't care at all about any of that. Didn't care when Russia was flattening Aleppo. Or using chemical weapons against their own people. Didn't care about that. But when the Kurdish majority of the SDF forces capture most of northeastern Syria and have coalition forces with them, Turkey invades. I have absolutely no respect for that country at all. They double deal back. They do double. Then this is my personal opinion, of course, but they do double deals with Russia. And then they also invade, and they also oppress people that aren't Ottoman Turk. So, yeah. And I personally think they shouldn't be part of NATO. The modern equipment renders their strategic position relatively unnecessary. Down here in Damascus, an IRGC colonel, Daoud Jafari, was killed in a car explosion. The IRGC are Iranians. The Jafari was a senior officer in the IRGC Aerospace Division. The IRGC blames Israel for the assassination. There were 70,000 Iranian fighters when I was in Syria. I can't imagine it's gotten any better. Up here in Armenia, the CSTO summit was welcomed with protests in Yerevan. Several hundred protesters have gathered on Yerevan's Freedom Square to mark the beginning of a summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, in the city. Protesters demanded that Armenia leave the organization over its failure to aid Armenia during fighting with Azerbaijan.
Россия полностью Армении! Россия полностью Армении!
Armenian Foreign Minister Erarat Mirzoyan said that hosting the summit was particularly important for Armenia since it was the first meeting since the September fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Armenia's leader vented his frustration on Wednesday that the failure of a Russian-led security alliance to come to his country's aid in the face of what he called aggression by Azerbaijan. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan called into question the effectiveness of the Six-Nation Collective Security Treaty Organization and pointed opening remarks to the summit as Russian President Vladimir Putin looked on. So, seems that the fissures are forming there. Jump down here into Yemen, where Houthi rebels attacked a fuel ship. Yemen's Houthi rebels targeted a ship at an oil terminal in the south of the country. The government said that in a statement that the strike took place while a commercial ship was in the port of Al Daba, near the city of Mukalla, and that it had been carried out by drones. It did not say whether any damage had been sustained or to which nation the vessel belonged to. That allows us to continue on as we move east here. We start off up here in China, where iPhone factory workers protest. The workers of the world's biggest Apple iPhone factory in Zhengzhou, China, confronted law enforcement officers and quarantine officials in hazmat suits, reportedly due to disputes about wage, sanitary conditions, and the availability of food. Protesters were seen being beaten by riot police, and local government has dispatched law enforcement officers to close the factory. See the law enforcement being called in here. Yeah. Not. Yeah. Yeah, this is China. And, yeah, the working conditions for them are pretty deplorable. It's essentially slavery in China to work at one of these places. So, yes, it's a big deal. Taiwan recorded the approach of Chinese fighters and ships. Taiwan's defense agency on Wednesday spotted 4 People's Liberation Army or PLA Navy ships, 2 fighter jets, and a military helicopter in the region adjacent to the island. It is alleged that during maneuvers, 2 J-16 fighters entered the Taiwan Air Defense Identification Zone in southwestern area, and a K-28 carrier-based anti-submarine helicopter was recorded to the east of the island. The Taiwanese military responded by raising air patrols and distributing radio warnings and deploying anti-aircraft missile systems. Coming officially from the Ministry of National Defense of Taiwan. Down here in the Philippines, coming out of Manila, the U.S. is seeking expansion of military presence in the Philippines and Indonesia. The United States wants a bigger military footprint in the Philippines and Indonesia, which could mean more army rotations with the key Indo-Pacific partner in the coming years. This is one of the initiatives of Vice President Kamala Harris launched Monday during her visit to America's oldest treaty ally in Asia. It was announced the same day as the meeting between Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin and his Indonesian counterpart in Jakarta, Indonesia, to discuss stronger defense ties. The high-level assurance from the vice president came one day after China's Coast Guard forcibly seized Chinese rocket debris that Filipino Navy personnel found and were towing to the Philippines-occupied island in the disputed South China Sea. Down here in Narathiwat, Thailand, at least one person was killed after a car explosion. During a terrorist attack against the police, 1 traffic police officer was killed and 31 people, including 18 civilians, were injured in the city of Narathiwat. An unidentified person in a uniform similar to that of the police parked a pickup truck filled with explosives near the residential complex of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The perpetrator then fled after the explosion. A fire broke out at the site of the attack. No one has yet taken responsibility for it. We can see here some of the photos coming out. Just the immense amount of destruction that occurred as a result of this terror attack. And down here in Indonesia, there is a rising death toll after the earthquake. The National Agency for Disaster Countermeasure, or BNPB, also raised the death toll from Monday's magnitude 5.6 earthquake to 271, of which 100, or 37%, were children. While over 2,000 people were wounded, 20 children died after a school collapse, and there are 40 who are still missing. Emergency services found a 6-year-old boy alive in the rubble on November 23rd next to his grandmother's body. Rescuers were faced with aftershocks and heavy rain. You can see as they are still going through and conducting rescue work there. And coming from BBC.
Soalnya anaknya baik, dia suka nurut sama orang tua, makanya saya belum bisa mengikhlaskannya, tapi insya Allah saya ikhlas.
Namanya siapa?
Saya melihat kejadian itu, saya nggak kuat lah melihat kondisi anak saya itu, badannya dari ini luka lah pada hijau.
Tapi mungkin saya pastikan waktu sekolah di sekolah dasarnya di SD-nya pasti diajarkan sama guru-gurunya kalau ada gempa pasti harus keluar, buat cepat keluar, kalau yang kecil harus tunduk apa gimana gitu. Sedangkan kan ini gempanya langsung besar, jadi kami tidak bisa apa-apa juga gitu.
And so that is the situation coming out of Indonesia. Jump over into Africa. We're over in Somalia. 49 al-Shabaab fighters were killed in an operation. 49 al-Shabaab fighters were reported killed on November 23rd in a military operation close to Lower Shabelle, according to Somalia's government. And down here in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, until 2018, a hailstorm destroyed homes. An estimated 1,058 people, or 213 households, were affected by a hailstorm, with some families losing the roofs, which were blown away, or roofing sheets riddled with the hailstones. Window glasses were also shattered, and household furniture, food, school uniforms, books, and other documents were soaked in water. Up in the DRC, or Democratic Republic of the Congo, up in Beni, an Islamic State attacks a Congolese military barracks. The Islamic State claimed to have attacked a Congolese army barracks, killing 2 soldiers before seizing weapons and ammunition. Two soldiers, and driving off with the rest before setting fire to their positions. There's the Islamic State official announcement regarding that attack. And see fire being set to one of the vehicles. And then several more. But the wave of attacks does not stop there. We jump up here into Chad, where Islamic State militants kill at least 10 military personnel during an attack. During an attack, the Islamic State militants, they killed between 10 to 35 military personnel, including the commander of the attacked base. The attack took place in the village of Naguabua on the border with Nigeria. And just to the south of that, the Islamic State also continued their campaign of terror, as two additional army camps fell to the Islamic State. The Islamic State militants took advantage of the flooding and defeated 2 camps of the Nigerian army in the state of Borno. On Saturday morning, the militants first attacked the camp located outside of the town of Malam Fatori, killing 20 soldiers and wounding 30 more, while destroying 2 pieces of equipment and seizing a third as a trophy, along with weapons and ammunition, according to the statement by jihadists. The jihadists of the Islamic State decided not to stop there, but continued their offensive on the same day, but in the evening, breaking into the city of Malam Fatori, where they stormed the second camp, killing 10 soldiers and wounding others, also replenishing chests with new trophies in the forms of weapons and ammunition. As a result of these events, the Nigerian army has fled from their positions. The Islamic State still control the captured positions to this day. Africa is the leading area for the fight against the Islamic State and fundamental Islamic terrorism. As the situation there, they really haven't gotten support. The Islamic State, Boko Haram, and other associated groups, Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda, JNIM, what have you, these terrorist cells really started very small. But while the focus was in places like Iraq, Syria, and the Middle East, areas like Africa were really neglected and simply didn't get the other support that these other regions did, whether that be training, advisory, equipment, what have you. And as a result, the Islamic State is easy to gain a lot of followers, as are all of these other groups, because the militaries here are very... While Africa is the fastest developing region in the world, 7 of the 10 top fastest developing countries in the world are actually in Africa. But the issue is that they are still very much developing. They don't quite have the monetary capabilities. They don't have the monetary funds. They don't have the basic needs, security guarantees, that they need to properly have a Western-styled military that would be able to conduct effective counterinsurgency operations, and to have the supplies and equipment, the modern supplies and equipment to give their troops. As a result, the Islamic State and the local militaries here really fight on mostly even footing. With the exception of air support, there really isn't a whole lot of difference. Both sides heavily utilize technicals. Both sides rarely have armor or basic protective equipment and gear. Both sides are using exact same types of weapon systems, and most of the time both sides are fighting on about a numerical even ground. But the Islamic State are very fierce fighters. Maybe not necessarily good, but they're very fierce fighters, and the more that they're conducting operations in this region, they are actually gaining more and more combat experience, making them even more and more deadly at their craft, which definitely does not help. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here, is the Islamic State and other terrorist groups are just so easy to expand because they're not fighting, the Iraqi army, well, maybe not nearly as good as, say, the American army is still very well equipped. They still have very good units. And they did the ground fighting against the Islamic State while the U.S. provided support. What they really needed was support assets and some advice and assistance. But militarily, they did okay. Not great, but they did okay. And they really are the ones that shed the blood to end the caliphate, as well as the SDF. So, but they got a lot more support and assistance from outside partners over the past 30 years. Africa hasn't. So it's just that the advantages we see in the Middle East to fight the counterterrorism, where we've seen how difficult that task is with a much better equipped force, it's just absolutely deplorable in a situation in these developing countries down here, and that's just the reality. And the conference in Morocco did confirm that. In Panama, heavy rainfall led to flooding and landslides. A landslide event occurred on the Atlantic coast of the central Panama, resulting in 2 fatalities after heavy rainfall. 70 families were displaced across 2 provinces at the Pacific coast of central Panama. Moderate rainfall is forecast over most of Panama from November 23rd through the 25th. If you want to have more information, you can go to reliefweb.international disasters. We come up here. We're in Greenville, North Carolina. Lockheed Martin unveiled the first F-16 Viper Block 772 jet fighter. The American company Lockheed Martin has published a photo of the first F-16 Fighting Falcon, which was manufactured at a plant in South Carolina. The main facility for the production of the F-16 of the year was a plant in Texas. However, the company decided to move the capacity to an enterprise in the city of Greenville. This was due to the increase in demand for 5th-generation F-35 Lightning II fighters. Lockheed Martin built the Viper-level aircraft for Slovakia, Bulgaria, Jordan, and Taiwan at the plant in South Coral. So this is the F-16 Viper. So it's still it's still an F-16, but it's the newest and most advanced version of the F-16 called the F-16 Viper. It lasts 50% longer than the previous production of the F-16. It's a proven airframe, affordable life cycle. It's a 4th generation fighter, which is a little bit different. Yeah, so they're saying that this one can operate at to 2060 and beyond. What this F-16? Basically, they took the F-16 and they made improvements to it. And they made these improvements to allow for it to last longer and to have upgraded equipment on it. Basically, upgraded sensor capabilities and to be able to withstand, like the materials you're using will withstand longer than traditional built F-16s. So while it's still a 4th generation fighter, it's a very capable fighter aircraft. Its main role is air superiority, but it can be used for also ground support too. Is it remote operated? No, it's not remote operated. The F-16 is still, it has a pilot. So, can it be a UAV? No. They cannot. It is piloted. That is not going to be a UAV. UAVs are specially designed and built. Employee ended up killing 6 at a Virginia Walmart. Chesapeake police confirmed 7 fatalities following an active shooter event that took place after 10 p.m. on Tuesday, November 22nd, at the Walmart on Sam Circle in Chesapeake, Virginia. The shooter is one of the 7 deceased. At least 6 people injured. 6 injured people were transported to local hospitals for treatment. The city identified the shooter as 31-year-old Andre Bing, who was an overnight team lead and had been an employee with Walmart since 2010. Jump up here to Washington, D.C., where we have a couple of different developments. The first one is the U.S. is requesting de-escalation in Syria. The U.S. DoD, deeply concerned by escalating actions in Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, says recent Turkish airstrikes in Syria directly threaten the safety of U.S. personnel and calls for immediate de-escalation. Once again, getting to that point I talked very extensively about earlier. Another $400 million security assistance package was sent to the country of Ukraine from the United States. We do have that official press release coming from the U.S. Department of Defense, and it includes additional munitions for the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, or NASAMS, 150 heavy machine guns with thermal imagery sights to counter unmanned aerial systems, additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, 200 precision-guided 155mm artillery rounds, 10,000 120mm mortar rounds, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, or HARMs, 150 high-mobility multi-wheeled vehicles, or Humvees, over 100 light tactical vehicles, over 20 million rounds of small arms ammunition, over 200 generators, spare parts for the 105mm howitzers, and other equipment. In total, the United States has committed more than $19.7 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration. Since 2014, the United States has committed more than $21.8 billion in security assistance to Ukraine and more than $19 billion since the beginning of Russia's unprovoked brutal invasion on February the 24th. So, see a lot of people, especially during the campaign season, of course, they're talking about how much money we were giving Ukraine. Just how much is it costing the taxpayer? The U.S. DoD defense budget is like over $700 billion. Every year. It's over $700 billion. In fact, how much does the U.S. spend on copy paper per year? U.S. government. Let's try that. So they said okay. So okay. I'm trying to find this. Trying to figure out if I can figure. Okay, I'll have to do it at a different point. Sorry, I was trying to figure out. So, here's the thing. So the U.S. budget in total is like something like $4 trillion, like almost $5 trillion. The U.S. Department of Defense budget alone is like $770 billion. We've given Ukraine since February, 19 billion. And over the last 9 years, we've given them almost 22 billion. So, to give you that idea, that is so small. I actually have done the math. When you compare over the last 2 years, it's less than 1% of the entire U.S. budget has gone to Ukraine over the last 2 years, let alone the last 9. The amount of money that has been given to Ukraine is absolute peanuts. It is nothing. It's not even trying, is what this is. And while, sure, $19 billion is a lot of money to me and to you, $19 billion in the scope of government spending is literally something that the U.S. would spend on toilet paper. Kid you not. The U.S. would spend that on toilet paper. So I find it absolutely ridiculous whenever I hear the argument of all of those hard taxpayer dollars going to Ukraine. That it accounts for almost negligible how much we have spent. It's almost negligible. It's not even worth mentioning. That is how that's how little money for $100 toilet seats. Yeah, like it's so so few. I wonder how much was the entire F-35? How much is the F-35 program? So, to give you an idea, the F-35 the F-35 program costs $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion. That's how much the F-35 program costs. That's just one program. That's just one. One program is $1.5 trillion. Not that's with a T, not a B, a T. Yeah. So, yeah. Just to let you guys know. The drone problem. Hundreds of Chinese manufactured drones have been detected in restricted airspace over DC in recent months. While officials don't believe Beijing is overseeing the swarms, the drone manufacturer secured funding from investment entities owned by the Chinese government, a fact it sought to conceal. The drone's HD cameras or other sensors could be hacked into for intel gathering, officials say. If you want more on that, you can take a look at Politico. And with that, we get to roll into some of the interesting or cool news of the night. And we jump over here to actually France, outside of Champagne. And we see that a British fisherman caught a gigantic goldfish. This goldfish is one of the world's biggest. While fishing in Blue Waters Lake in Champagne, France, the goldfish weighed 67 pounds, 4 ounces, or 30.5 kilograms. The fish was named the Carrot and is reportedly the second largest of its type seen to date. That is a goldfish. That is the thing you got at the local fair. If you were lucky. Yeah. What? Yeah. It's a 67-pound goldfish. I never thought I was going to see that in my life. I didn't know goldfish could get that big. That's huge. What? A little bit of good news for me. For those that don't know, or for those that many of you know, but for those that don't, I have actually have an issue with my eye that I've been going to the doctor to see, which is occasionally why every once in a while I'll be on stream with like an eye patch and stuff. Well, there seems to be hope for me in the far-flung future, because Neuralink co-founder unveils a Science Eye sight restoration implant. Neuralink co-founder Max Hodok and the science team unveiled the Science Eye, the company's brain-computer platform. Science Eye is a visual prosthetic. It targets retinitis pigmentosa, or RP, and dry age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, and two forms of serious blindness. The combination device uses the optogenetic gene therapy targeted at the cells of the optic nerve. It combines with an implanted, flexible, thin-film, ultra-dense micro-LED display panel inserted directly over the retina. Hodok, Yifan Kong, Alan Mardinley, Corey Wolin, and Emma Zhao and the science team authored a new release unveiling the platform. They explained that inserting a gene into the cells of the optic nerve makes it possible to stimulate them using the small display. The heavily compressed signal sent down the optic nerve allows the Science Eye to simulate data into the optic nerve. So that's the little sensor. And this is the official website for the Science Eye. Pretty cool. So there's hope for me in the far-flung future when I do eventually lose my eyesight. It is fantastic to know. I probably will never be able to afford it, but it's there. Come over to NASA's Goddard Flight Center to finish up our night, where Orion's optical navigation camera took closer pictures of the moon. So you can see the moon from afar here. And then we can see nice up-close photographs of the lunar surface as it flew by. Pretty awesome to see. I'm always happy to see more space stuff. And I am really, really, really looking forward to when we actually land on the moon again. If you ever have a chance, you should go check out the Artemis missions and what they're actually trying to do with them on their website. It's pretty awesome. But yes, it's nice to see the moon up close and personal. People are stuck on the goldfish as to when I see real life Magna Cart. It looks cute. Hervis says it looks cute, and I'd like a huge goldfish plushie. Some good fillet right there. World hunger solution is goldfish. If we can make goldfish that big, world hunger won't be an issue. Yeah, no kidding. So, yeah, I think those are probably very special circumstances. Please don't release your pets into the wild, by the way. They're considered most of them are considered invasive species and will literally destroy their ecosystems. Please don't do that. Please do not release random animals into the world that they probably don't necessarily belong in, like the giant goldfish. Like, don't release your goldfish into a pond, because one of two things is going to happen. It will either die very quickly, a terrible, terrible death, or it will destroy everything around it. And generally speaking, Mother Nature doesn't have two ways around it. Spanish moss is very, very well known for that. as well as many other things down there. There's a bunch of different types of vines that grow over the United States. There's a type of ant, actually, the Argentine ant, which is essentially taken over the planet. In case you didn't know, yeah, they are everywhere. They have super colonies too, so they wipe out any other ant species around them. It's insane. There's a colony of Argentine ants that spans the entire continent of North America and into South America. They are huge. So please don't release random creatures, plants, animals. Don't release random stuff into the wild. Generally speaking, it doesn't end well for everything else, and it permanently changes the environment around it. Please don't do that. If you think releasing your pet goldfish into the world is going to help something, it's not. It will either end in it dying very horribly, or you will destroy the entire ecosystem you thought it would be a joyous part of. Well, with that is all of the news of the night. I hope that you guys have found this informative, and I hope that you guys have been able to hold on to my really rough rants on some of the stuff. I apologize, but it is, we are giving commentary to this as well as informing you, and I'm more than happy to give my personal opinion. That's one of the perks of being a spokesman, I guess. But that is the reality of the news here. And once again, I hope that you found it informative, if not enjoyable. But there's a purpose to this, and this is to help raise money for helping people all throughout the world, and to help people that are affected by the very same news situations we talk about. We're never doing any kind of merchandising or any kind of, we're never going to be doing any super chats or anything like that. Everything we do here is to help people. It's 100% charity. So please check out the video description below. Please give your wonderful support to those organizations down below, and give them as much love and affection as you can. If not, then at least be able to, at least help support us in keeping this thing going and keeping it growing. So really appreciate it. Be sure, if you haven't yet, to be sure to check out DemizeFPS's stream on Friday, starting at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. He's running a gaming charity live stream on Twitch, which the link is in the description below. And he is running a charity stream, hoping to raise $500 or more. We're definitely hoping for more, for a group called Stack Up, which provides gaming consoles and connects veterans through gaming in the United States to help with mental health issues and bring mental health awareness, trying to curb veteran suicide, and trying to help individuals with PTSD and anxiety and depression and stuff like that in the veteran community who currently suffer from that. So please be sure to check out his stream. Once again, the video is in the description below. It will be Friday, November 25th at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to go over there and give him some love. And thank you guys for joining us. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. If not, I do hope that you find that safety, security in the very near future. And in the meantime, if you guys are in the United States or somewhere that celebrates, please have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. Please be sure to spend some time with your family and your friends. And I hope you guys have a fantastic, nice meal there. And I hope that it is nice and peaceful, and that you always have something to be thankful for. In the meantime, we will see you once again on Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, at 9 p.m. Central, for another 48 hours of news and review. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до повноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home. soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду волновах і чудно кличі діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your number 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду волновах і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду волновах і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду волновах і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляду волновах і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.